My best friend stole my billionaire husband with a pregnancy. 2 years later I revealed the child isn't his. The courtroom was so silent you could hear hearts breaking. I watched my ex-husband's face drain, of all color as the judge read the DNA results out loud. His hands were shaking. The paper slipped from his fingers and floated to the floor like a death sentence. Adrian looked at Claire, his voice barely a whisper. Are you telling me that Carter is not my son? Claire's face had gone from confident to terrified in seconds. Her perfectly manicured hands clutched her Chanel purse like it was a life raft. Adrian, please let me explain. Explain what? Adrian's voice rose, cracking with rage and devastation. Explain how you told me he was my heir? My son? Explain how you destroyed my marriage, took my wife's best friend, convinced me to abandon my daughters for a child that isn't even mine? The lawyer cleared his throat. Mr. Castellano, the paternity test confirms that Derek Mitchell is the biological father of the child known as Carter Castellano. You have zero biological relation to this child. I sat there watching the man who had humiliated me in front of 100 guests, who had served me divorce papers at our anniversary dinner, who had called our twin daughters disappointing because they weren't sons. I watched his entire world collapse the same way mine had 2 years ago, and I felt nothing but peace. Claire stood up, her voice desperate now. Adrian, I love you. I've always loved you. Derek meant nothing. He was a mistake. Carter is yours in every way that matters. Adrian turned to her with eyes so cold I barely recognized him. Get out. Get out of my sight before I have you arrested for fraud. But where will I go? Claire's voice broke. I have nothing. I have no one. You should have thought about that before you lied. Before you abused my daughters. Before you destroyed everything. That's when Claire's eyes found mine across the courtroom. The hatred in her gaze was pure venom. This is all your fault, Natalie. You did this. You ruined everything. I stood up slowly, smoothing down my dress, the same way I had stood up at that anniversary dinner 2 years ago. But this time I wasn't running. This time I had won. No, Claire, I said quietly, my voice steady and strong. You ruined everything the moment you decided my life was something you could steal. I just made sure the truth came out. And now you get to live with the consequences. Have you ever trusted someone with your whole heart only to watch them destroy you? Have you ever been betrayed by the 2 people you loved most in this world? Have you ever hit rock bottom, so hard you didn't think you'd survive, only to rise up stronger than you ever imagined possible? This is my story. The story of how my billionaire husband and my childhood best friend shattered my entire life in one night. How they took everything from me. My marriage, my home, my children, my dignity. How I was left with nothing but $50,000 and a studio apartment where gunshots rang out at night. But this is also the story of how I fought back. How I found evidence they never saw coming. How I exposed lies that brought an empire crashing down. And how I built a life more beautiful than anything I'd lost. If you've ever felt powerless, if you've ever wanted justice, if you've ever needed to know that broken things can be made whole again, then this story is for you. Stay with me until the end because the revenge, it was worth every single tear. Family, if you believe that the truth always comes out, I need you to hit that like button right now. If you stand with people who've been betrayed and live to tell the tale, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, or just say I'm with you, Mr. Hearthline. Let me know this family is real. And if you're new here, welcome to Mr. Hearthline Stories, where we don't just tell stories, we tell the truth about life, love, betrayal, and the beautiful thing called justice. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because you don't want to miss what happens next. Now let me take you back to where this all began. 4 years into a marriage I thought would last forever. To the night that destroyed everything I knew, and to the moment I realized that the people closest to you can be the ones who hurt you the most. Natalie Rivera had believed in fairy tales once. At 27, She sat in the private dining room of Charleston's most exclusive restaurant, smoothing the fabric of her champagne-colored dress. Her fingers traced the delicate beading along the neckline, a nervous habit she'd developed over the years. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across tables dressed in cream and gold. The soft clink of expensive glassware mixed with elegant laughter. 100 guests filled the space with the kind of effortless sophistication that only old money and new wealth could create together. These were Adrian's business partners, Charleston's elite, both their families, people Natalie had once considered friends. And sitting at the family table in a stunning crimson dress that hugged every curve was Claire Thompson, best friend since they were 8 years old, the girl who had held Natalie's hand on the first day of 3rd grade when Natalie had been the new kid, terrified and alone. The woman who had stood beside her at her wedding 4 years ago, tears streaming down her face as she promised to always be there. The godmother to her 3-year-old twin daughters, Maya and Zoe. The twins sat at the children's table now, their matching pink dresses like spring flowers against the formal backdrop. Maya was carefully coloring on the paper placemat the restaurant had provided, her tongue poking out in concentration. Zoe was chattering to the other children, her hands gesturing wildly as she told some elaborate story about butterflies. Natalie caught Claire's eye across the room and smiled. Claire lifted her champagne glass in a small toast. Her green eyes were unreadable in the low light, but her smile was familiar, comforting. How many secrets had they shared over 20 years of friendship? How many late-night conversations? How many dreams spoken out loud? How many tears wiped away? Natalie had no idea that in less than 20 minutes, every single one of those memories would be poison. For years, Natalie thought, her hand instinctively moving to touch the diamond bracelet Adrian had given her that morning. 4 years of marriage to Adrian Castellano, the brilliant, devastating billionaire CEO who had swept her off her feet when she was just 20 years old. She could still remember the first time she'd seen him. She'd been a junior in college working part-time at a gallery opening to make extra money. He'd walked in wearing a perfectly tailored suit, his dark hair styled with casual precision, his blue eyes sharp and intelligent. When he'd stopped in front of the painting she'd been standing beside, she'd nearly forgotten how to breathe. "Do you know anything about this piece?" he'd asked, his voice smooth and confident. Natalie had stammered something about the artist's use of light and shadow, probably making no sense at all. But Adrian had listened like she was the most fascinating person in the room. He'd asked her to dinner that same night. They'd dated for 3 passionate years. Adrian had been attentive, romantic, generous. He'd surprised her with weekend trips to New York and Paris. He'd sent flowers to her dorm room, then later to her apartment.
He told her she was brilliant and beautiful and everything he'd ever wanted. When he'd proposed on a beach in the Maldives, Natalie had said yes without hesitation. The wedding had been a fairy tale. 8 bridesmaids in flowing champagne gowns, with Claire as maid of honor in a dress that shimmered like starlight. 300 guests, a reception at the most prestigious venue in Charleston. Natalie had felt like Cinderella, spinning in Adrian's arms on the dance floor, believing that happy endings were real. Their honeymoon in Bali had been pure magic. And when Natalie had come home pregnant, she'd thought her life was perfect. The pregnancy had been unexpected but not unwelcome. Twins, 2 little girls who would complete their family. But that's when things had started to change. "Natalie, we need to talk about school," Adrian had said one evening, pulling her into his arms in their penthouse bedroom. The floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Charleston harbor, the water dark and glittering with reflected city lights. "What about it?" Natalie had asked. She'd been 6 months pregnant, her belly round and heavy, her graduation just 3 months away. Adrian had kissed her forehead, his hands gentle on her waist. "My wife doesn't need to work or finish college. You'll focus on our family. I'll provide everything you could ever need." Everything you could ever want. But I'm so close to graduating, Natalie had protested weakly. Just 3 more months, and you'll be 7 months pregnant, probably on bed rest. Adrian's voice had been firm but kind. Natalie, I make more in a day than most people make in a year. You don't need a degree. You need to take care of yourself and our babies. Let me take care of you. It had made sense at the time. Why stress herself when she didn't need to? Why push through finals and presentations when she could relax, prepare for the twins, enjoy being pregnant? So she dropped out. 3 months before she would have walked across that stage and received her diploma in marketing. 3 months before she would have had something that was hers, independent of Adrian. The twins had arrived 6 weeks early. Maya and Zoe, 5 pounds each, tiny and perfect and terrifying. Natalie had never been so exhausted or so in love. Those first few months had been a blur of feedings and diapers and sleepless nights. Adrian had been wonderful at first. He'd held the girls, walked the floors with them when they cried, marveled at their tiny fingers and toes. But somewhere around their first birthday something had shifted, like winter creeping in after a golden autumn, so gradual you didn't notice until you were freezing. Adrian had started working later, coming home after the twins were asleep, snapping at Natalie over small things. The house wasn't clean enough. Dinner wasn't ready on time. The twins were too loud. When he was trying to work from home, then the comments had started. Did you really need to eat that second piece of cake? Natalie, you still haven't lost all the baby. Wait, maybe if you actually did something with yourself during the day instead of just watching the girls, you'd have more energy. God. Natalie, are you really that stupid? I explained this to you 3 times already. The words had landed like slaps, leaving bruises on her soul rather than her skin. Natalie had started to believe them, started to see herself through Adrian's eyes. Lazy, stupid, lucky that he'd married her at all. And then there were the things he'd said about Maya and Zoe. The girls had just turned 3 when Adrian had looked at them across the dinner table and sighed heavily. I really hoped for sons. Natalie had frozen, her fork halfway to her mouth. What? Sons, Natalie. Boys. To carry on the Castellano name. To inherit my company. Adrian had cut into his steak with precise movements. Daughters are disappointing. They can't carry on my legacy. They're 3 years old, Natalie had said, her voice shaking. They're brilliant and beautiful and perfect. Adrian had looked at her with those ice blue eyes. They're girls. And unless you can give me sons, they're a disappointment. Natalie had wanted to scream at him, wanted to grab the twins and run. But where would she go? She had no degree, no job, no money of her own. Everything was in Adrian's name. The house, the cars, the bank accounts. She was completely dependent on him. So she'd swallowed the pain and tried harder. Tried to be the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect ornament for Adrian's perfect life. But it was never enough. And through it all, Claire had been there, coming over for coffee, taking Natalie out for girls' nights. When Adrian was traveling, listening to her cry, holding her hand, telling her it would get better. What kind of friend would I be if I wasn't here for you? Claire had said just last month, hugging Natalie tight. You and me, we're sisters. Nothing will ever change that. Natalie had believed her. Now, sitting in this restaurant on their 4th anniversary, watching Adrian stand at the head table, with a microphone in his hand, Natalie allowed herself to hope. Maybe tonight was the turning point. Maybe Adrian had planned this elaborate celebration because he wanted to fix their marriage. Maybe the man she'd fallen in love with was still in there somewhere, waiting to come home. Thank you all for being here tonight, Adrian began, his voice carrying the natural authority of a man who commanded boardrooms and bent competitors to his will. His smile was the one that had made Natalie believe in fairy tales. 4 years ago, I made a decision I thought was the honorable thing to do. Natalie's smile faltered slightly. Honorable thing? What an odd way to phrase it. My girlfriend got pregnant. Adrian's tone was conversational, almost casual, like he was discussing a business deal. And I married her. I did what I thought was right at the time. The room had gone quiet, uncomfortably quiet. Natalie felt her heart begin to hammer against her ribs. She looked around, saw confusion on her parents' faces, saw something like pity in her mother's eyes. But I'm done pretending. Adrian's blue eyes met hers across the table, and they were empty of everything except cold satisfaction. I'm done living a lie. This marriage was never built on love. Natalie couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The beautiful room with its chandeliers and flowers had become a cage. The air felt too thick, pressing down on her chest. Adrian pulled a manila envelope from inside his tailored charcoal jacket. The movement was smooth, practiced. He'd rehearsed this. He slid the envelope across the table, and it stopped directly in front of Natalie's untouched champagne glass. Divorce papers. His voice rang through the silent room like a death sentence. My lawyers have prepared everything. You'll receive exactly what the prenup stipulates, which I assure you, isn't much. Gasps erupted around the room. Natalie heard her mother's sharp cry of horror, heard her father's furious shout, but the sounds were distant, muffled, like she was underwater and drowning. Her hands were shaking as she stared at the envelope. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of cruel joke. Then Claire stood up. Natalie watched, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing, as her best friend, her sister, in everything but blood, walked to Adrian's side. She moved with purpose, her crimson dress flowing like blood. Adrian pulled her close with a possessive hand on her waist, and Claire leaned into him, comfortable, familiar, like she'd done it 1,000 times before.
Claire and I have been together for over a year. Adrian's voice held a note of triumph that made Natalie's stomach turn. She's pregnant with my son. The heir I've been waiting for. We'll be married as soon as this marriage is legally dissolved. The room exploded. Shocked murmurs, chairs scraping, camera phones lifting, flashes of light. But Natalie couldn't hear any of it over the roaring in her ears, over the sound of her entire world, shattering into pieces too small to ever put back together. She looked at Claire, at the woman who had been her best friend for 20 years, who had held her when she cried, who had promised to always be there. Claire's hand rested on her stomach, a small, barely visible bump beneath the crimson dress. She was glowing with satisfaction. At the children's table, Maya looked up. Her brown eyes, so much like Natalie's own, were wide and confused. She saw her mother's face and understood, in the way that children always understand, that something terrible was happening. "Mommy?" Maya's small voice broke. Then she started to cry, loud, wailing sobs that cut through the chaos. Zoe joined her immediately, not knowing why but knowing that her sister was scared and sad. Natalie started to stand, to go to her daughters, but Claire moved first. She leaned down, her perfectly manicured hand landing on Natalie's bare shoulder. Her grip was tight, possessive. Her breath was warm against Natalie's ear as she whispered words meant only for her. "You never deserved him, Nat. You got lucky with a pregnancy, that's all. But luck runs out." Claire's voice was sweet poison. "I've been in love with Adrian since your wedding day. Did you know that? Stood next to you, smiled for the cameras, gave a toast about eternal friendship, and all I could think about was how it should have been me in that wedding dress." Natalie couldn't speak, couldn't move. "I'm taking everything that should have been mine from the start." Claire's lips curved into a smile. Against Natalie's ear. "Your husband, your house, your money, your life, and those twins? I'm going to make sure they forget you ever existed. I'm going to be their mother now, the only mother they'll remember." She straightened up, smoothing her dress, and walked back to Adrian's side. Adrian wasn't done. He addressed the room like he was presenting quarterly earnings to shareholders. "I'm also filing for full custody of Maya and Zoe. Natalie has no income, no degree, no means to support the children. They need stability. They'll remain with me, with us, He gestured to Claire and she smiled. The smile of a woman who had won. Natalie stood on shaking legs. Every eye in the room was on her. Some pitying, some shocked, some gleeful at the scandal. She could see phones still recording. This would be all over social media within the hour. The humiliation was complete. But she would not cry here. Would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. She looked at Adrian one last time. At the man she'd loved. The father of her children. The person she'd built her entire life around. I hope she was worth it. Natalie's voice came out steady, stronger than she felt. I hope when you look at her in 5 years, in 10 years, you remember this moment. Remember what you destroyed. She looked at Claire. At 20 years of friendship turned to ash. And I hope you remember that anything stolen never brings happiness. You didn't win, Claire. You just bought yourself a nightmare. Then Natalie walked through that room of 100 guests with her head high and her spine straight. She walked past her sobbing parents, past Adrian's smirking business partners, past the children's table where Maya and Zoe were still crying. She walked out of the restaurant, out into the cool Charleston night, and she kept walking until she reached her car in the parking garage. Only then, alone in the darkness, did she collapse. Only then did she let the sobs come, tearing out of her chest like something dying. She pressed her hands against her mouth to muffle the sounds, but they came anyway, wave after wave of grief and rage and devastation. How had she not seen it? How had she missed the signs? Had there been lingering looks between Adrian and Claire that she'd dismissed? Had there been touches she'd explained away? How long had they been laughing at her behind her back? And Claire, God, Claire, 20 years of friendship, 20 years of shared secrets and inside jokes and memories. The first day of 3rd grade, middle school dances, high school graduation, college visits, Natalie's wedding day, when Claire had cried and said, "I'm so happy for you. You deserve all the happiness in the world." It had all been a lie. All of it. Natalie pulled out her phone with shaking hands. Pulled up photos. There was one from just 2 weeks ago. Natalie, Claire, Maya, and Zoe at the park. They were all smiling, Claire holding Zoe on her hip, Maya hugging Natalie's legs. The caption read, "My favorite people in the world." 2 weeks ago, Claire had already been sleeping with Adrian, had already been pregnant with his child, had already been planning to destroy Natalie's entire life. And she'd smiled for the camera like nothing was wrong. Natalie deleted the photo. Then she opened her contacts and deleted Claire's number. Blocked her on every social media platform. Erased every digital trace of a friendship that had never been real. But she couldn't erase the memories. Couldn't undo 20 years. Couldn't stop loving someone just because they'd proven themselves unworthy of that love. She cried in that parking garage until she had no tears left. Until her eyes were swollen and her throat was raw. Until she was empty. Then she drove to the penthouse she'd shared with Adrian. The doorman looked at her with pity, which meant he already knew. Of course he did. Everyone would know by now. She packed 2 suitcases, clothes, toiletries, photos of the twins. She left everything else. The jewelry Adrian had given her, the designer clothes, the life she'd built. She left her wedding ring on the kitchen counter. Then she went to the twins' room. Maya and Zoe were asleep in their matching beds, their faces tear-stained. Adrian had brought them home and put them to bed, at least. That was something. Natalie kissed each of their foreheads, breathed in the sweet smell of their hair, whispered promises. She didn't know if she could keep. "I'm gonna fight for you. I'm gonna get you back." Promise, babies. Mommy promises. She wanted to take them with her. Wanted to grab them and run and never look back. But she had nowhere to go. No money. No plan. And if she took them, Adrian would have her arrested for kidnapping. His lawyers would destroy her. So she left her daughters sleeping in the home that would soon belong to another woman. And she left before Adrian came back, before she had to see his face again. Natalie Rivera drove away from her old life with 2 suitcases and $50,000 that would hit her bank account once the divorce was finalized. She drove to a motel on the outskirts of Charleston and paid for a room by the week. The carpet was stained. The air conditioner rattled. The people in the next room were screaming at each other at 2 in the morning. She lay on a bed that smelled like industrial cleaner and stared at the water-stained ceiling. And she wondered how she was going to survive this. The law office was in a strip mall between a pawn shop and a cash advance place. The waiting room had plastic chairs and outdated magazines and fluorescent lights that buzzed too loud.
Natalie sat, with her hands folded in her lap, trying not to think about the last time she'd been in a lawyer's office. That had been for her wedding. Adrian's family lawyers had presented the prenuptial agreement with apologetic smiles. Just a formality, they'd said. Standard practice for families with significant assets. Natalie had been 23 and in love and convinced that she and Adrian would be together forever. She'd signed without really reading it. Adrian had kissed her afterward and promised that it didn't matter because they'd never need it. Turns out it mattered quite a bit. Ms. Rivera? A woman appeared in the doorway. She was in her 40s, kind eyes behind practical glasses, wearing a suit that had seen better days. "I'm Jennifer Walsh. Come on back." The office was small but tidy. Natalie sat in the chair across from the desk and tried to prepare herself for whatever was coming. Jennifer Walsh opened a file folder and sighed. She looked at Natalie with genuine sympathy. Reviewed the prenuptial agreement that Mr. Castellano's legal team provided. "I'm going to be straight with you because you deserve honesty." Natalie nodded, her throat tight. "You'll receive $50,000 total. No alimony. The prenup specifically waives any spousal support regardless of the length of the marriage or circumstances of the divorce." Jennifer's voice was gentle but firm. "You'll have no claim to any property, assets, or future earnings. Everything acquired during the marriage remains in Mr. Castellano's name." $50,000. Natalie had spent more than that on a car 2 years ago without thinking twice. "What about the twins?" Natalie asked. Her voice sounded small. Jennifer's expression grew more somber. "He's filing for primary physical custody with you receiving standard visitation. Given that you have no current income, no degree, no work history for the past 4 years, and he can provide significant financial stability." "What does standard visitation mean?" Natalie interrupted. "Every other weekend, Friday evening to Sunday evening. 1 supervised dinner per week." Natalie felt like she'd been punched in the chest. "Every other weekend? They're 3 years old. They need their mother." "I know." Jennifer's eyes were compassionate. "And I'm going to fight for more. But I need you to be prepared for the reality. Family court favors stability and financial security. Mr. Castellano can provide private schools, nannies, health care, everything the court will consider important for the children's well-being. I'm their mother." The words came out broken. "And that matters. That will matter to the judge." Jennifer leaned forward. "But we need to be realistic about what we're up against. His legal team is the best in the state. They're going to paint you as unstable, unemployed, living in a motel. They're going to argue that the children's lives shouldn't be disrupted." Natalie pressed her hands against her eyes, willing herself not to cry. Not here. Not in front of this kind lawyer who was already doing her a favor by taking her case at a reduced rate. "What can I do? What can I do to get my daughters back? Get stable?" Jennifer pulled out a notepad and started writing. "Get a job, any job. Get an apartment in a safe neighborhood. Document everything. Every phone call with Mr. Castellano, every custody exchange, everything. If there's any evidence of the children being mistreated or neglected, document it immediately. He wouldn't hurt them." Even as Natalie said it, she wasn't sure she believed it. The Adrian she'd married wouldn't have hurt them. But she didn't know this Adrian anymore. Maybe not him. But what about Claire Thompson? Natalie's blood went cold. Claire was going to be living with her daughters. Claire, who had Whispered, I'm gonna make sure they forget you ever existed. If you see any signs of abuse, physical or emotional, you call me immediately. Jennifer's voice was firm. We photograph, we document, we report to Child Protective Services. That's our best chance at getting emergency custody. 8 weeks later, Natalie stood in a courtroom and watched her marriage officially end. Adrian didn't even show up. His lawyers handled everything. Signed papers were exchanged. The judge declared the marriage dissolved. 4 years reduced to a stack of legal documents. The $50,000 hit Natalie's account that afternoon. She stared at the number on her phone screen. It had seemed like so much in the abstract. Now, looking at it as the sum total of her entire life with Adrian, it seemed pathetically small. 2 months after that, Natalie was working the lunch shift at a catering company when she saw the notification on her phone. Claire had posted on social media. The photo showed Claire in a hospital bed, glowing and exhausted, holding a tiny baby wrapped in a blue blanket. Adrian sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders, his expression pure pride and joy. Welcome to the world, Carter James Castellano. Our beautiful son. Our perfect family is complete. In the background of the photo, barely visible, were Maya and Zoe, standing awkwardly in their matching dresses, looking small and uncertain. Natalie's co-worker found her in the bathroom 10 minutes later, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe. 6 months after the anniversary dinner that destroyed everything, the engagement announcement appeared in Charleston's Society magazine, a 4-page spread. Natalie bought a copy at the grocery store and made herself look at it. Adrian and Claire photographed in front of the harbor, looking windswept and in love. Claire's engagement ring was massive, easily twice the size of the one Natalie had worn. After a whirlwind romance, Claire Thompson and Adrian Castellano are thrilled to announce their engagement. The couple, who share a beautiful son, Carter, plan to wed this summer in an intimate ceremony. Adrian's daughters from his previous marriage will serve as flower girls. There were more photos. Adrian, Claire, and baby Carter in the penthouse living room. Claire, holding Carter while Maya and Zoe sat on the floor playing with blocks, looking like accessories, rather than children. The happy family at the park, Adrian pushing Carter in a stroller while Claire walked beside him, the twins trailing behind. Every photo was a knife in Natalie's chest. This was her life. This should have been her family. Except it never really had been, had it? She'd just been a placeholder until Claire decided to take what she wanted. Natalie's studio apartment was in a neighborhood where she triple-checked the locks every night. Gunshots punctuated the darkness sometimes, sharp cracks that made her flinch. Police sirens were a regular lullaby. The building smelled like mildew and old cooking grease. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor, 400 square feet. The carpet was brown and stained, with things she didn't want to think about. The ceiling leaked when it rained, and she had to put out buckets to catch the water. The refrigerator hummed so loudly she couldn't sleep until she got used to it. The hot water lasted about 5 minutes before running cold. But it was hers. She'd paid first month, last month, and security deposit with her dwindling savings. She'd furnished it with second-hand items from thrift stores, a futon that served as both couch and bed, a small table with 2 chairs, a lamp that flickered but worked. She worked double shifts at the upscale catering company, serving hors d'oeuvres and champagne to people who had once been her peers.
People who sometimes recognized her and quickly looked away, embarrassed for her or by her. Natalie could never tell which. She wore a black server uniform and stood invisibly in corners of beautiful rooms. She cleared plates and refilled drinks and listened to conversations about vacation homes and investment portfolios and private schools. The work was exhausting. Her feet ached. Her back hurt. She came home smelling like other people's expensive food, but it paid hourly plus tips, and she needed every dollar. The $50,000 was disappearing faster than she'd anticipated. Security deposit and first month's rent on the apartment, basic furniture, Work clothes and shoes. Lawyer fees for Jennifer. Walsh. Bus passes because she couldn't afford a car. Groceries, though she ate as little as possible, to make the money stretch. And gifts for Maya and Zoe, because even though she could barely afford food, she needed her daughters to know that mommy loved them, that mommy was thinking about them, that mommy hadn't abandoned them even though she was sure that's what Adrian and Claire were telling them. Some nights, Natalie ate one meal a day so she could afford to buy the twins the stuffed animals they'd asked for, so she could show up to custody exchanges with small presents that said "I love you" when she couldn't say much else. The custody arrangement was torture. Every other Friday at 6 in the evening, Adrian would pull up to the designated meeting spot in his Mercedes SUV. Natalie would bring Maya and Zoe, who would climb into the back seat with their little backpacks. They'd press their faces against the window as Adrian drove away, their small hands waving goodbye. And every other Sunday at 6 in the evening, he'd bring them back. They climbed out of the car, quieter than they'd been when they left, more withdrawn, like something in them was slowly dimming. Natalie had 48 hours with her daughters every 2 weeks. 48 hours to cram in 2 weeks worth of love and attention and normalcy. 48 hours to convince them that they were safe and loved and that mommy would never stop fighting for them. And then they were gone again, back to the penthouse, back to Adrian and Claire and baby Carter, back to a life Natalie was no longer part of. The worst part was watching them change. Maya had always been shy, but she was becoming almost silent. She barely spoke during their weekends together, just clung to Natalie like she was afraid to let go. When Natalie asked her about school or friends or what she did at Daddy's house, Maya would just shake her head and burrow closer. Zoe, who had been bright and bubbly and full of endless questions, was losing her spark. She still talked, but there was a sadness in her eyes that no 4-year-old should have. She asked questions that broke Natalie's heart. Mommy, why don't we live together anymore? Mommy, does Daddy not like us? Mommy, Claire says you left because you didn't want us. Is that true? And Natalie would hold her daughter and try to explain in words a 4-year-old could understand. That none of this was her fault. That mommy loved her more than anything in the world. That mommy didn't leave them. Daddy made mommy go away, but mommy was fighting to come back. But how do you explain adult cruelty to a child? How do you make them understand that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who hurt you deepest? Then there were the bruises. The first time Natalie noticed one, Maya was changing into pajamas. There was a mark on her inner arm, small and purplish, finger-shaped. Natalie's stomach dropped. Baby, how did you get this? Maya's eyes went wide and frightened. Fell, Mommy. You fell on your arm? Natalie kept her voice gentle, non-accusatory. I'm clumsy. Maya's voice was small, rehearsed. I fall a lot, but 3-year-olds didn't lie well. And Natalie knew fear when she saw it. She photographed the bruise with her phone, her hands shaking. Then she called Jennifer Walsh. Document everything, Jennifer reminded her. Photograph every bruise, every mark. Make notes about their behavior, anything they say. We need evidence. Natalie reported it. She called Child Protective Services. A bored-sounding woman took her statement. Someone would look into it, she was told. 2 weeks later, she got a call back. We investigated and found no evidence of abuse. The children appear healthy and well cared for. Mr. Castellano and Ms. Thompson were cooperative and concerned. The bruise in question is consistent with normal childhood play. But it wasn't normal childhood play. Natalie knew it. Maya knew it. But without proof, without Maya being willing or able to say what really happened, there was nothing Natalie could do. The bruises continued. Small ones, always in places that would be covered by clothing. Maya's upper arms. Zoe's sides. The soft skin of their inner thighs. How did you get this, baby? Natalie would ask gently, photographing each one. I fell. I'm clumsy. I ran into something. The answers were always the same. And the fear in their eyes was always there, warning Natalie not to push. Someone was hurting her daughters. Someone was teaching them to lie about it. And Natalie was powerless to stop it. She reported every bruise, called CPS every time, but the response was always the same. Without evidence of intentional harm, there's nothing we can do. Children get bruises playing. The Castellano household is being monitored. Everything appears normal. Adrian's legal team was too good. They had responses for everything. Character witnesses who testified that Adrian and Claire were wonderful parents. Doctors who examined the twins and found nothing concerning. A home that was clean and safe and filled with every advantage money could buy. Against that, what did Natalie have? Photographs of bruises that could be explained away. The word of a bitter ex-wife with no resources. Suspicions she couldn't prove. The system that was supposed to protect children was failing hers. And there was nothing she could do except document and wait and hope that someday, somehow, she'd find proof that would make someone listen. Some nights, Natalie stood on her apartment's tiny balcony and looked out over the broken neighborhood, looked at the liquor store on the corner with its barred windows, looked at the street where drug deals happened in broad daylight, looked at the broken streetlights and graffitied walls. She was 27 years old. She'd once had a penthouse overlooking the harbor, designer clothes, a car that cost more than most people made in a year, a life that looked perfect from the outside. Now she had 400 square feet and a job serving food to people who looked through her like she was invisible. She had 48 hours every 2 weeks with her daughters. She had no degree, no prospects, no future that looked like anything except more of this. Some nights, standing on that balcony, Natalie understood for the first time in her life why people chose to give up. Why they looked at the ledge and thought maybe falling would hurt less than this. Why they decided that the fight wasn't worth fighting anymore. But then she'd think about Maya's face. About Zoe's laugh, even though it came less frequently now. About 2 little girls who needed their mother, who needed someone to fight for them even when the fight seemed impossible. And Natalie would step back from the edge, would go back inside her tiny apartment, would set her alarm for another double shift,
would fall asleep on her futon and dream about a day when things would be different. She didn't know how that day would come, didn't know what miracle would have to happen to change her circumstances, but she kept breathing, kept working, kept fighting, because that's what mothers do, even when they're broken, even when they're drowning, even when the whole world has turned against them, they survive, because their children need them to. And Natalie Rivera had made her daughters a promise. She would fight for them. She would get them back. She would protect them. She just had to figure out how. 8 months after the divorce, Natalie was working a charity gala for a children's hospital. The event was at the Grand Harbor Hotel, 300 guests in evening wear, champagne flowing like water, the kind of extravagance that was supposed to raise money for kids who couldn't afford healthcare. Natalie circulated with a tray of hors d'oeuvres balanced on one hand. Crab cakes, prosciutto, wrapped asparagus, little puff pastry things filled with cheese. Each one probably cost more to make than she'd earn in an hour. Her feet were screaming. The required heels were cheap and didn't fit properly, but they were black, and they met the uniform standards. Her smile was professional and empty. After 8 months of this work, she'd mastered the art of being invisible while standing in plain sight. It had been a custody weekend. That morning, when it was time for the twins to go back to Adrian, everything had gone wrong. Maya had wrapped her small arms around Natalie's neck and screamed, actually screamed, loud, and desperate and heartbreaking. "I want to stay with you, Mommy. Don't make me go back. Please, please don't make me go." Natalie had tried to soothe her, tried to calm her down, but Maya was inconsolable. Zoe had joined in, both girls crying and clinging to Natalie like she was the only safe thing in their world. Adrian had shown up at the meeting spot and physically pried Maya's hands from around Natalie's neck. His grip had been rough, impatient. Maya had screamed louder. "You're being pathetic," Adrian had hissed at Natalie. making them hysterical like this. You're traumatizing them. I'm not doing anything, Natalie had said, tears streaming down her own face. They don't want to go. Can't you see that? Because you're putting ideas in their heads. Adrian had buckled both sobbing girls into the back seat. You're making this harder than it needs to be. He'd driven off with Maya and Zoe's faces pressed against the rear window, their mouths open in. Wails Natalie could see but no longer hear. She'd driven back to her apartment and sobbed until she threw up. Then she'd pulled herself together, put on her uniform and gone to work. Because bills didn't care about broken hearts. Now, hours later, she was functioning on autopilot. Smile. Offer the tray. Nod politely. Move to the next group. Repeat. She was standing at one of the stations, refilling her tray, when a man approached. He was in his early 30s, tall and lean with an understated elegance. His suit was perfectly tailored but not flashy. He had kind eyes and a genuine smile, the kind that actually reached his eyes instead of stopping at his mouth. Excuse me, he said politely. Would it be possible to get sparkling water instead of champagne? I'm not much of a drinker, but I feel awkward holding nothing. Of course. Natalie reached for the sparkling water with hands that trembled slightly. Exhaustion and suppressed emotion made her movements less steady than usual. He noticed. His expression shifted from pleasant to concerned. Are you all right? The question caught her off guard. Most guests didn't really see the servers, much less notice when something was wrong. The professional smile snapped into place. Long day. I'm fine, thank you. He accepted the water but didn't move away. His eyes held genuine kindness, not pity, just authentic human concern. I hope the rest of your evening gets easier. Something about his sincerity made Natalie's eyes threaten to well up. She blinked hard, forcing it back. That's very kind. Thank you. He nodded and walked away, and Natalie went back to work. But something about that brief interaction stayed with her. The genuine kindness in a stranger's eyes. The reminder that good people still existed in the world. The gala ended close to 11. Natalie helped with breakdown, packing up supplies and loading them into the catering van. By the time she was done, it was nearly midnight. She was exhausted, down to her bones. The bus that would take her closest to her apartment wouldn't come for another 40 minutes. She stood at the bus stop in the cool night air and tried not to think about how much her feet hurt, how empty her stomach was, how another weekend with her daughters had ended in tears. Then the sky opened up. Rain poured down in sheets, soaking through Natalie's thin jacket in seconds. Of course, this would happen. She had no umbrella, no car, nothing but 40 minutes of standing in a thunderstorm to look forward to. Headlights cut through the downpour. A sleek black Audi pulled up to the curb. The passenger window rolled down. It was the kind man from the gala. Hey, he called over the sound of the rain. I saw you standing here. Can I offer you a ride? No pressure at all. I can drop you at the nearest subway station if you'd prefer. Natalie hesitated. Every warning about stranger danger ran through her head. But she was soaked, exhausted, and the alternative was standing in a thunderstorm for nearly an hour. She looked at his face, those kind eyes. Something in her gut said he was safe. Just to the subway is fine. Thank you. She climbed into the car, trying not to drip all over his leather seats, mortified at the puddle forming under her shoes. He didn't speak at first, turned up the heat, handed her some napkins from the glove compartment for her face, respected her space. Then, gently, rough night? Natalie laughed, came out bitter, surprising herself. Rough year. He glanced at her, and there was genuine empathy in his green eyes. I'm sorry. For what it's worth. You were incredibly professional tonight despite whatever you're dealing with. That takes real strength. Something about his kindness, after the day she'd had, after the 8 months she'd survived, broke something in her. A single tear escaped before she could stop it. She wiped it quickly, embarrassed. God, I'm sorry. You don't need this. Hey, no. His voice was soft, non-judgmental. Don't apologize. We all have rough years. I've been there. They drove in silence for a moment. Rain hammered against the windshield. The city lights blurred. Through the water. When they reached the subway station, he put the car in park and pulled a business card from his wallet. Look, I know this is completely forward and you have zero reason to trust a stranger, but you look like you could use a friend. He held out the card. Not anything weird, I promise. Just if you ever want to grab coffee and talk to someone who doesn't know anyone in your life and won't judge, here's my card. Zero pressure. Zero expectations. Natalie took the card, studying it in the dim light. Ethan Monroe, principal architect. Monroe. Sustainable design. Why would you? She couldn't finish the question. Why would a stranger care? He smiled sadly. Because 3 years ago I was exactly where you are. Rock bottom. Didn't think I'd survive it. And a stranger showed me unexpected kindness when I desperately needed it. I'm just paying it forward.
Natalie clutched the card, her throat tight. Thank you. For the ride. For this. Anytime. Take care of yourself. She climbed out of the car and watched him drive away. Then she looked down at the card in her hand. She probably wouldn't use it. Would probably throw it away when she got home. Because trusting people, opening up, letting anyone in, that's what had destroyed her life in the first place. But she put the card in her wallet anyway. Just in case. 2 weeks later, after the worst day, Natalie texted the number on the card. The worst day started with a custody exchange. Maya came back with a fresh bruise, this time on her upper arm. Dark purple, clearly finger-shaped. Someone had grabbed her hard enough to leave. Marks, baby, how did this happen? Natalie asked gently, her phone already out to photograph it. Maya's eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head frantically. I can't tell. I can't tell or I'll get in bigger trouble. Who said you'd get in trouble? But Maya wouldn't answer. Just cried silently while Natalie took photos and tried not to let her own rage show. Natalie called Jennifer Walsh immediately. Sent the photos. This is the 5th bruise in 3 months. This is not normal. Someone is hurting my daughters. I know. Jennifer's voice was tight with frustration. I'll file another report with CPS. I'll request an emergency custody hearing. But Natalie, without Maya or Zoe being willing to say who did this, without witnesses, it's going to be hard. So someone can just keep hurting them and there's nothing I can do? We're doing everything we can. But Adrian's lawyers are arguing that kids get bruises. That you're a disgruntled ex-wife making accusations. Without concrete proof of intentional harm. Find me a way to get proof. Natalie's voice broke. Please. They're 4 years old and someone is hurting them and I can't protect them. I'm trying. I promise you I'm trying. But trying wasn't enough. The CPS report came back the same as all the others. Insufficient evidence. The children appear healthy. The home environment is stable. Case closed. At work that afternoon, Natalie was carrying a tray of champagne glasses when the shaking started. Her hands trembled so badly that the glasses rattled together. She made it to the kitchen before the panic attack hit full force. Her manager found her on the floor, hyperventilating, unable to catch her breath. Natalie, honey, you need to go home. I'm fine. I just need a minute. You're not fine. Go home. We'll cover your shift. Natalie went home to her studio apartment and lay on her futon and stared at the ceiling. The brown water stain had grown. She needed to tell the landlord, but what was the point? Nothing ever got fixed. Her phone sat on the makeshift coffee table. The business card was still in her wallet. She'd thought about calling Ethan Monroe a dozen times over the past 2 weeks. Always talked herself out of it. He was just being polite. He didn't really want to hear from some broken server he'd given a ride to. But today, Maya's bruised arm was all she could see. The fear in her daughter's eyes. The helplessness of not being able to protect her own children. Natalie picked up her phone and pulled out the card. Hi, this is Natalie from the gala catering event. Is that coffee offer still open? I could really use a friend right now. She hit send before she could overthink it. Probably wouldn't hear back. Probably he'd forgotten who she even was. Her phone buzzed within 2 minutes. Absolutely. Tomorrow at 2 p.m.? There's a quiet cafe near Riverside Park. Low-key, good coffee, corner booths where you can talk privately. I'll text you the address. Natalie stared at the message. When was the last time someone had shown up for her? When was the last time anyone had cared enough to actually follow through? She couldn't remember. That sounds perfect. Thank you. She showed up at the cafe the next day, terrified and hopeful in equal measure. It was exactly as Ethan had described. Quiet, warm, with corner booths that offered privacy and comfort. Not pretentious. Not the kind of place where she'd feel judged for her thrift store clothes. Ethan was already there, sitting in a corner booth with 2 menus. He stood when he saw her, smiled that genuine smile. Natalie, I'm glad you came. Thank you for meeting me. She slid into the booth, her hands fidgeting with the menu. They ordered coffee, made small talk about the weather, about the cafe. And then Ethan said gently, you don't have to tell me anything you're not comfortable sharing. But I'm here to listen if you need to talk. And that's when Natalie realized she hadn't planned to tell him everything. But Ethan Monroe had the rarest gift. He listened, not waiting for his turn to speak, not offering unwanted advice or empty platitudes. He genuinely, completely listened. So Natalie told him about Adrian, about falling in love at 20, about the fairy tale wedding, about dropping out of college when she got pregnant because her husband said she didn't need to work, about watching Adrian change, the cruelty that crept in like winter, the way he made her feel stupid and worthless and lucky he'd married her at all, about Claire, 20 years of friendship destroyed in one night, the betrayal that cut deeper than anything Adrian had done, about Maya and Zoe, her 3-year-old daughters whom she only saw every other weekend, about the bruises she couldn't prove were intentional, about the fear in their eyes, about feeling utterly, devastatingly powerless. Ethan's jaw clenched as she talked, his hands curled into fists on the table, but his eyes held only compassion. That's horrible. I'm so sorry. No one should go through that. I'm not strong. Natalie's voice broke. Everyone keeps telling me I'm strong, but I'm not. I'm barely surviving. I can't protect my own children. You're working multiple jobs, living in impossible circumstances, and still fighting for your daughters. Ethan leaned forward. That's the definition of strong. You're doing the impossible with nothing. That's not weakness. That's heroic. It doesn't feel heroic. It feels like failing every single day. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Can I share something with you? Natalie nodded. I lost my wife 3 years ago. Cancer. She was 28. We'd been married for 4 years, had just started talking about having kids. His voice cracked slightly. She fought for 18 months. Watched the strongest person I knew waste away to nothing. And when she died, I didn't know how to keep living. Natalie reached across the table instinctively, squeezing his hand. I'm so sorry. Thank you. Ethan's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I know it's not the same as what you're going through, but I understand loss. I understand feeling like the world is cruel and unfair. Understand wondering if you'll ever feel okay again. Do you feel okay again? Some days. He smiled sadly. Took a long time. A lot of therapy. A lot of learning to forgive myself for surviving when she didn't. But yeah, some days I feel okay. And those days are getting more frequent. They talked for 4 hours. The coffee went cold and they ordered more. They talked about loss and survival and the unfairness of life. They talked about their childhoods and their dreams and the people they'd been before tragedy reshaped them. The cafe staff eventually had to politely tell them they were closing. As they stood on the sidewalk outside, Ethan said, "Can we do this again? I'd really like to be your friend if you're open to it."
For the first time in 8 months, Natalie felt something other than despair. A tiny spark of hope, small and fragile but real. I'd like that. I'd really like that. They exchanged numbers. made plans to meet for coffee again in 3 days. And when Natalie rode the bus home to her studio apartment, she felt lighter somehow. Like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't completely alone in this. The friendship grew slowly, carefully, like something precious that required gentle handling. Natalie and Ethan met for coffee twice that first week, then 3 times the next week. Then it became almost daily, sometimes at the cafe near Riverside Park, sometimes at a diner halfway between their neighborhoods, once at a bookstore with a coffee shop inside, where they browsed shelves and talked about their favorite authors. Ethan never pushed for anything romantic, never made Natalie feel less than because of her circumstances, never looked at her with pity, only with respect. He asked about the twins every single time they talked. How's Maya doing with her shyness? Is she opening up at all? Natalie would shake her head. She's getting quieter, actually, more withdrawn. It scares me. And Zoe? Is she still obsessed with butterflies? Yes. Natalie smiled despite everything. She talks about them constantly, wants to know everything, about their life cycles, their migration patterns. She's 4 years old and using words like metamorphosis. She's brilliant, just like her mother. Those small acknowledgments meant everything. That Ethan saw her daughters as individuals, remembered their quirks and interests, cared about their well-being. One afternoon, about 6 weeks into their friendship, Natalie mentioned offhandedly that her work shoes had holes in the soles, that she was saving up for new ones but hadn't quite gotten there yet. The next week, Ethan showed up to coffee with a gift card to a shoe store. What's this? Natalie asked. My company did this raffle thing and I won a bunch of gift cards I don't need. Ethan's voice was casual. Please use this. Those shoes are killing your feet. Natalie knew there was no raffle, but his thoughtfulness in preserving her dignity, in giving her away, to accept help without feeling like charity, made her throat tight with emotion. Thank you. She meant it for more than just the gift card. For months into their friendship, Ethan learned that Natalie had been 3 months away from graduating college when she dropped out. They were walking through Riverside Park, fall leaves crunching under their feet. Natalie had just finished an evening shift and Ethan had met her at the bus stop with coffee. What were you studying? He asked. Marketing. Natalie kicked at a pile of leaves. I was actually pretty good at it. Had a few professors tell me I had real talent. Why don't you finish? She laughed bitterly. With what time? What money? I work 60 hours a week just to afford rent and food. What about online classes? I looked into it. Can't afford the tuition. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then what if I helped? No. Natalie stopped walking. Ethan, you've already done so much. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering an investment. He turned to face her, his green eyes serious. You're brilliant, Natalie. You have talent and drive, and you deserve the chance to finish what you started. Consider it a loan if it makes you feel better. You can pay me back when you're a CEO. Natalie's eyes filled with tears. Why are you doing this? Why do you care? Because you deserve someone in your corner. And because I can help, so why wouldn't I? That weekend, Ethan helped Natalie enroll in online marketing classes. 3 courses to start, manageable around her work schedule. He paid the tuition up front and wouldn't hear any arguments. Natalie cried when she got her student login credentials. She hadn't realized how much she'd mourned the loss of her education until she had the chance to reclaim it. The classes were hard. Balancing them with work and custody weekends was exhausting. But Natalie threw herself into the work with desperate determination. This was hers. Something Adrian hadn't given her, something Claire couldn't take away. And she was good at it. Really good. Her professors praised her insights, her creativity, her work ethic. For the first time in years, Natalie felt like she was more than just someone's ex-wife, more than just a struggling server. She was a student, a woman with a future, person with value. 6 months into their friendship, during one of their regular coffee meetings, Ethan set down his cup and looked at Natalie with something like nervousness. Can I ask you something? Of course. Would you be comfortable with me meeting Maya and Zoe? He rushed to add, only if you're ready. No pressure at all. I hear so much about them and I'd really like to meet these incredible girls. Natalie's first instinct was to protect her daughters, to keep them separate from this new part of her life. They'd been through so much already. But then she thought about Ethan, about how consistently he'd shown up for her, how he'd never once let her down or made her regret trusting him. I'd like that. Her voice was soft. I think they'd really like you. The following weekend was a custody weekend. Natalie cleaned her tiny apartment until it was as presentable as possible, picked up the toys scattered across the floor, made sure there was juice and snacks. Ethan arrived at 2 in the afternoon with a bag from the art supply store. I heard you two like to draw, he said when Natalie opened the door. I thought we could do some art projects. Maya and Zoe stood behind Natalie, peeking out shyly. They weren't used to visitors, weren't used to men who weren't their father. Girls, this is my friend Ethan. Natalie knelt down to their level. He's very nice and he brought presents. Zoe stepped forward first, always the braver of the two. What kind of presents? Ethan knelt down too, putting himself at their height. Sketch pads and colored pencils. I'm an architect, which means I draw buildings for my job. I thought maybe you could help me design some imaginary buildings? What's imaginary? Zoe asked. It means make-believe, like in your imagination. We could draw castles or treehouses or rocket ships, whatever you want. Can we draw a castle for butterfly princesses? Zoe's eyes lit up. Absolutely. That sounds like the best kind of castle. Maya stayed behind Natalie, watching Ethan with wide, cautious eyes. She'd learned not to trust easily. Ethan didn't push, just opened the art supplies and started sketching on one of the pads. What do you think, Maya? Should the butterfly princess castle have tall towers or short ones? Maya whispered something Natalie couldn't hear. Ethan leaned closer. What was that? Tall towers, so the butterflies can see far away. That's a great idea. Will you help me draw them? Slowly, carefully, Maya came closer, sat down next to Ethan, took a colored pencil he offered. For the next 3 hours, Ethan sat on Natalie's threadbare carpet and drew with her daughters. He was patient, encouraging, genuinely interested in their ideas. He never talked down to them, never dismissed their suggestions. They designed butterfly castles and dragon towers and underwater palaces. Ethan turned their crayon scribbles into architectural sketches, showing them how to add details and dimension. Maya, who was painfully shy around new people, whispered to Natalie after about 30 minutes. Like Mr. Ethan, Mommy. He has kind eyes. Not like Daddy's eyes.
Those words hit Natalie in the chest. Maya had noticed the difference between someone who saw children as obligations and someone who genuinely valued them. Later, Zoe asked, "Can Mr. Ethan come to the park with us?" The park was their weekend ritual. A small playground a few blocks away, the equipment old but functional. Natalie took the girls there every custody weekend, pushing them on swings, helping them across monkey bars. If he wants to. Natalie looked at Ethan. You don't have to. I'd love to. At the park, Ethan pushed Maya and Zoe on the swings, making them shriek with laughter when he pushed them high. He helped them across the monkey bars, his hands steady and safe underneath them. He sat in the grass and continued their imaginary architecture, drawing butterfly gardens and rainbow bridges. He was patient, gentle, never once checking his phone or acting bored. He treated a Saturday afternoon with 2 4-year-olds like it was exactly where he wanted to be. Natalie watched this man who had no obligation to her or her children treat them with such pure tenderness. Watched him laugh at Zoe's jokes and listen carefully to Maya's whispered observations. Watched him be the kind of father figure her daughters had never had. Something cracked open in her chest. Something she'd thought was dead forever. As they were walking back to the apartment, Zoe reached up and took Ethan's hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. You're nice, she announced. Can you come back next time? If your mom says it's okay. I'd really like that. Maya took Natalie's hand and looked up at her. He can come back, right, Mommy? Yes, baby. He can come back. That night, after Ethan left and the girls were asleep on Natalie's mattress, she sat on her futon and let herself feel something she hadn't allowed in a long time. Hope, not just for justice or survival, but for happiness. For the possibility that maybe someday life could be good again. 9 months into their friendship, Natalie's apartment ceiling finally gave up entirely. It had been leaking for months, but the landlord never fixed anything despite her repeated requests. Then one night during a thunderstorm, a section of the ceiling collapsed. Water poured in, soaking the carpet, ruining what little furniture she had. Natalie called the landlord in a panic. His response was to tell her she'd have to wait until Monday for repairs. It was Friday night. She didn't know what to do. Couldn't afford a hotel. The shelter was full. She'd already called. She sat in her ruined apartment with buckets trying to catch the water and wanted to scream. Then she called Ethan. Not because she expected him to fix it, just because she needed to hear a friendly voice. He showed up 30 minutes later with more buckets, towels, and a plan. All right, he said, surveying the damage. We can't fix the ceiling tonight, but we can minimize the damage and make this a game for the girls. A game? Maya and Zoe were watching from the corner, frightened by the water and chaos. Ethan walked over to them, knelt down. Have you ever heard of a rain bucket orchestra? Both girls shook their heads. Well, when it rains inside, we don't get upset. We make music. He positioned buckets under the worst leaks. Listen. Each bucket makes a different sound when the water hits it. Can you hear it? The girls listened. The different-sized buckets did make different sounds. Plink, plunk, splash. Let's make a song. Ethan handed each girl a spoon. You can tap the buckets to add to the music. For the next hour, Ethan turned a disaster into an adventure. Maya and Zoe giggled as they tapped buckets and splashed in puddles. They forgot to be scared. Natalie watched with tears streaming down her face. Not from sadness, but from gratitude. This man kept showing up, kept turning her worst moments into something bearable. Later, after the girls finally fell asleep exhausted on the mattress, Ethan and Natalie sat on the floor, surrounded by buckets. Thank you. Natalie's voice was thick. For everything. For being here. For making them laugh. You're an incredible mother, Ethan said quietly. Those girls are so lucky to have you. Natalie started crying harder. I feel like I'm failing them every day. Ethan moved closer, pulled her into a hug. You're doing the impossible with nothing. That's not failing. That's heroic. They don't feel lucky. They feel scared. And I can't protect them. You're fighting a war with no weapons against an enemy with unlimited resources. And you're still standing, still fighting, still showing up. That's not weakness, Natalie. That's the strongest thing I've ever seen. She cried into his shoulder until she had nothing left. And he held her through all of it, steady and safe. The next custody weekend, Maya woke up at 2 in the morning screaming. Natalie jolted awake, ran to her daughter. Maya was sitting up in bed, sobbing, her small body shaking with terror. The mean lady. She hurt me. I don't want to go back to the mean lady. What mean lady, baby? Natalie pulled Maya into her lap. But Maya couldn't or wouldn't say. Just cried and cried about someone hurting her, about being scared, about not wanting to go back. Natalie texted Ethan, not expecting him to respond at 2 in the morning. But he called within minutes. Is everything okay? Maya's having nightmares. I don't know what to do. I'm coming over. Ethan, it's the middle of the night. I don't care. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He showed up with warm milk and chamomile tea. Sat with Maya for over an hour, rubbing her back, telling her stories about brave little girls who were stronger than they knew, singing soft lullabies in a surprisingly good voice. Maya finally fell asleep in his arms, her tear-stained face peaceful at last. Natalie watched from the doorway, her heart breaking and healing at the same time. This man owed them nothing. He had his own life, his own grief, his own healing to do. But here he was at 2 in the morning, holding her traumatized daughter, singing her to sleep. When Ethan carefully laid Maya back in bed and joined Natalie in the living area, she couldn't find words big enough. Thank you doesn't feel like enough. You don't have to thank me. Ethan's voice was gentle. Care about them. About all of you. Why? The question came out broken. Why do you care so much? Because you're worth caring about. Because they're amazing kids who deserve adults who show up for them. And because when you've lost everything like I have, you learn that the only thing that really matters is connection. Love. Being there for the people who need you. He paused, looking at her with those kind green eyes. And maybe because somewhere along the way this stopped being just friendship for me. But we don't have to talk about that now. Natalie's breath caught. What? I'm falling in love with you, Natalie. With your strength and your kindness and your fierce love for your daughters. But I know the timing isn't ideal and I don't want to pressure you. I just needed you to know. 1 year after they met, Ethan took Natalie to dinner at a modest but nice restaurant. Nothing fancy, just good food and quiet atmosphere. They'd been dancing around their feelings for months. Moments where their hands lingered when they touched. Looks that lasted too long. The way Ethan had started calling her sweetheart without seeming to realize it. Over dinner, Ethan set down his fork and looked at Natalie seriously. I need to be honest with you about something. Natalie's heart stopped. This was it. He was leaving. He'd realized she was too much work, too damaged, too complicated.
I'm falling in love with you. He said it clearly, no hesitation. Actually, I think I fell months ago. I just didn't want to say anything until I was sure you might be ready to hear it. He continued, his green eyes holding hers. Every time I see you, I see the strongest, most loving, most incredible person. You're brilliant and kind and resilient. You're everything I didn't think I'd ever find again after losing Rebecca. Natalie felt tears streaming down her face. And Maya and Zoe? Ethan smiled. They're amazing. Being part of their lives, even just as your friend, has been a privilege. And if you ever wanted more, if you ever wanted this to be something beyond friendship, I would be honored. Honored to be part of your life, part of their lives. I thought I'd never feel safe again. Natalie's voice shook. Never feel seen. Never feel loved. You are all of those things. You always were. He just couldn't see it. But I do. I see you, Natalie. All of you. And I love what I see. They kissed for the first time in that restaurant parking lot. It was soft and sweet and felt like coming home. I love you too. Natalie whispered against his lips. I didn't think I could love again. But I do. I love you. The next 18 months transformed Natalie's life in ways she couldn't have imagined. Ethan hired her at his architectural firm as a junior marketing coordinator. She was brilliant at it. Fresh ideas, incredible work ethic, natural talent that had been dormant for years. She finished her degree online with honors, walked across a stage at 29 years old, and received her diploma. Ethan and the twins were in the audience cheering. She was making real money for the first time in years. Not wealthy, but comfortable, stable. She moved to a better apartment. 2 bedrooms so Maya and Zoe could have their own room on custody weekends. Safe neighborhood. No gunshots. No leaking ceilings. An actual kitchen where she could cook real meals. The twins' room had matching beds with butterfly comforters. Bookshelves full of stories. A desk for art projects. Everything Natalie had dreamed of giving them. And she'd fallen deeply, completely in love with a man who saw her, valued her, and loved her. Daughters like they were his own. On a Tuesday evening, 18 months after their first kiss, Ethan asked Natalie to come over to his house for dinner. The twins were coming too, he said. He wanted to cook for all of them. Natalie arrived with Maya and Zoe, who ran immediately to hug Ethan. They called him Uncle Ethan. Now, though sometimes Maya slipped and called him Daddy before correcting herself. After dinner, after the dishes were cleared, Ethan looked nervous. Girls, can you come here for a second? Maya and Zoe ran over, curious. Ethan got down on one knee, not facing Natalie, but facing the twins. Maya, Zoe, I need to ask you something very important. Both girls' eyes went wide. I love your mommy very much, and I love both of you. I'd like to ask your mommy to marry me, but only if that's okay with you too. This would be your family, and you get a voice in this decision. Are you going to be our daddy? Zoe asked. If you want me to be. If you'll have me. Maya looked at Zoe. Zoe looked at Maya. Some silent twin communication passed between them. Then they both screamed yes, and Tackle hugged Ethan so hard he almost fell over. Natalie was already crying. Ethan gently extracted himself from the twins and turned to her, still on one knee. He pulled out a ring box. Natalie Rivera, you are the strongest person I've ever known. You've been through hell and you're still kind, still loving, still beautifully, impossibly you. He opened the box. The ring inside was simple and elegant. Nothing like the ostentatious diamond Adrian had given her. I don't have billions. I can't give you mansions or unlimited diamonds. But I can give you loyalty, partnership, respect, and a love that will never, ever waver. I can give you a home where you're valued, where your voice matters, where you never have to doubt your worth. He smiled through his own tears. I can give you forever with someone who sees you, all of you, and loves every part. Will you marry me? Natalie was sobbing too hard to speak at first. She nodded frantically, then managed to choke out. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms. The twins jumped around, them screaming, "We're going to be a real family." In that moment, Natalie was happier than she'd ever been. But even in that perfect moment, her heart ached. Because in 2 days Maya and Zoe would have to go back to Adrian's house, back to Claire, back to whatever was happening behind closed doors, that left them with bruises and nightmares. And Natalie still didn't know how to save them. Family, we need to pause here for a moment. If you're feeling the story, if Natalie's journey is touching your heart, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to know that broken hearts can heal, and broken lives can be rebuilt. Comment below and tell me what you're thinking right now. Are you proud of Natalie? Do you believe in Ethan? Are you ready for justice? And tell me where you're watching from, or just say, "I'm with you, Mr. Hearthline. Let me feel this family's presence." Because what happens next changes everything. Natalie is about to make a decision that will either save her daughters or destroy her completely. And you need to stay with me to see how this unfolds. Let's keep going. 1 month after the engagement, 4-year-old Maya came back from Adrian's house and wouldn't stop crying. Natalie tried everything. Held her, rocked her, sang to her. But Maya was inconsolable, sobbing like her heart was breaking. "Sweetie, what's wrong? Talk to mommy. I don't want to go back there." Maya's voice was raw from crying. "Please don't make me go back. Please, mommy. Did someone hurt you, baby?" Maya's eyes went wide with terror. She shook her head frantically, violently. I can't tell, or she'll make me go away forever." She, not Daddy. She, Claire. Who said you'd go away forever? Natalie kept her voice gentle. But Maya wouldn't answer. Just cried and cried until she exhausted herself into sleep. That night, after both twins were asleep, Natalie sat with Ethan at her kitchen table. She told him about Maya's breakdown, about the pronoun that confirmed what Natalie had suspected for months. Claire was hurting her daughters, and the girls were too terrified to say it out loud. "I need to find a way to prove what's happening." Natalie's voice was steel. "I need evidence. Real evidence that no one can explain away." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "Then what if we gave the twins something to take with them? Something small that they'd keep with them? Like what? A stuffed animal with a recording device inside." Natalie stared at him. "That's possibly illegal." "Probably." Ethan met her eyes. "It's definitely morally gray. It's desperate." But Natalie thought of the bruises, the nightmares, Maya's terrified face, Zoe's sad eyes, the way they both begged not to go back. "Do it." 2 weeks later, Natalie brought home 2 stuffed bunnies. They were soft and adorable, one pink and one purple. Inside each one was a tiny voice-activated recording device with 72 hours of battery life. These are special bunnies. Natalie gave one to each twin. They'll keep you safe while you're away. From Mommy, like guardians. Can you keep them with you always? Even when we sleep? Maya asked. Especially when you sleep. They'll protect you from bad dreams.
Maya clutched her purple bunny to her chest. I love her, Mommy. I'm going to name her Hope. That's a beautiful name, baby. Zoe hugged her pink bunny. Mine's Lucky. Perfect. The custody exchange happened on Friday evening as usual. Adrian barely looked at Natalie. Claire sat in the passenger seat, her belly flat again. She'd had the baby 6 months ago. Carter was probably with a nanny. Maya and Zoe climbed into the back seat, each clutching their special bunny. Natalie watched the car drive away and felt sick with anxiety and hope in equal measure. This would either give her the proof she needed or it would be nothing. Just her daughters with new stuffed animals. She wouldn't know for 72 hours. Those were the longest 72 hours of Natalie's life. She worked, went to class, functioned, on autopilot, but her mind was always on Maya and Zoe. What were they experiencing? What was being said? Was it happening right now? Sunday evening, Adrian's SUV pulled up to the exchange point. Maya and Zoe climbed out, both still, holding their bunnies. Did you have a good weekend? Natalie asked, keeping her voice normal. Yes. Maya's voice was flat. We went to the park. That sounds fun. Natalie buckled them into her car. She wanted to grab the bunnies immediately but forced herself to wait until they were home. At the apartment, Natalie made dinner, gave the girls a bath, read them stories, went through all the normal routines even though her heart was pounding. Finally, with Maya and Zoe asleep, she carefully retrieved both bunnies, called Ethan to come over. They sat on her couch at midnight and connected the first recording device to Natalie's laptop. Then they listened. The first hour was mundane. The sounds of the car ride. Maya and Zoe talking about their bunnies. Background noise of the penthouse. Then, stop crying, you little brat. You're giving me a headache. Claire's voice. Sharp, vicious, full of contempt. I want my mommy. Maya's small voice, sobbing. Your mommy doesn't want you. That's why you're here. You ruined her life and now you're ruining mine. The sound of a slap. A child screaming. Natalie pressed her hand against her mouth to muffle her gasp. Ethan's face had gone pale, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. Shut up. Claire's voice again. If you wake the baby, I swear to God I'll lock you in the closet for the whole night. They kept listening. There was more. Auntie Claire, I'm hungry. Can I have a snack? Zoe's voice, tentative. You ate an hour ago. You're not hungry, you're greedy. No wonder your father can't stand looking at you. That's not true. Zoe crying now. It is true. He told me himself. He wishes you were never born. You and your sister are mistakes. Natalie was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. Ethan put his arm around her, but his eyes never left the laptop screen. The worst recording came from Saturday night. Let me make something very clear, you little parasites. Claire's voice was cold, controlled. I am going to be your mother now. Your real mother. That woman you see twice a month? She's nothing. She's nobody. She paused. And when I marry your father, we're sending you away to boarding school where you belong. Maybe then I can finally have the perfect family I deserve without you two ruining everything. The recording ended. Natalie and Ethan sat in silence. We have her. Ethan's voice was quiet, deadly. We finally have her. But there was one more piece Natalie needed. One more person who could blow Adrian and Claire's world apart. Derek Mitchell. Finding Derek Mitchell took 3 weeks of digging. Natalie hired a private investigator with money she'd saved, tracked him through mutual acquaintances, found out where he worked, where he lived. She'd seen him exactly once, at a distance, at a company party before everything fell apart. Claire had introduced him as a work colleague. Natalie had thought nothing of it. Now she knew. Derek Mitchell was Carter's biological father, the man Claire had been sleeping with, while pretending to be Natalie's best friend, the man who'd helped destroy her life. The meeting was set for a parking garage downtown, neutral territory. Derek had been reluctant to meet at all, but Natalie had been persistent. She showed up with Ethan as backup, though Ethan stayed in the car. This conversation needed to be one-on-one. Derek Mitchell looked terrible. He was in his mid-30s, average height, the kind of face you'd forget in a crowd. But his eyes were haunted, dark circles underneath. The look of a man who hadn't slept well in months. "Why are you here?" His voice was defensive. "Because you know the truth about Carter. And because I think you're not a monster." Natalie kept her voice calm. "I think you're a man who made a mistake and can't figure out how to make it right." Derek's face crumpled. "You don't know anything about me. I know you're in love with Claire. I know Carter is your son, not Adrian's. I know you've been watching the woman you love build a life with another man while you're shut out." Derek looked away. "What do you want?" "I want you to tell the truth. She told me it would be temporary." Derek's voice broke. That she needed financial security first. That once she had enough money, once Adrian married her and she got a settlement or inheritance, or whatever, she'd leave him and we'd be together. Me, her, and Carter. A real family. He laughed bitterly. "But it's been over a year and she's marrying him. And I don't even get to hold my son. I see pictures on social media of Adrian holding him, Claire posting about their perfect family, and that's my boy, mine." Natalie felt a flicker of sympathy despite everything. "I'm sorry. Are you? Because I helped her destroy your life." "Yes, you did." Natalie didn't pull the punch. "But I think you were manipulated too. Used. And I think some part of you knows that what she's doing is wrong." She pulled out her phone, played a clip of the recording. Claire's voice calling the twins parasites, saying they were mistakes, threatening to send them away. Derek listened with growing horror on his face. "She's abusing my daughters." Natalie's voice was steel wrapped in grief, physically and emotionally. "Have hours of recordings, and I'm taking her to court. But I need you to tell the truth about Carter's paternity. I need Adrian to know what kind of person he's really marrying. If I do this, I lose everything." Derek's eyes filled with tears. "She'll hate me. I'll never see Carter again. If you don't do this, my daughters keep getting hurt." Natalie leaned forward. "And your son grows up believing a lie, growing up in a house with a woman who calls innocent children parasites. Is that what you want for him?" Derek was quiet for a long time. Natalie let the silence stretch. "Finally, what do you need me to do?" "I need you to testify, to submit to a DNA test, to tell the truth under oath about your relationship with Claire and Carter's paternity. She'll destroy me. She's destroying children." Natalie's voice hardened. "For year-olds who've done nothing wrong, except exist. So yes, this will cost you. But doing the right thing usually does." Derek closed his eyes. "When I close my eyes, I see him. Carter. He has my nose. My eyes. He's mine, and I've never even held him. Then fight for him. Help me fight for my girls. And maybe when this is over, you'll actually get to be his father." Derek opened his eyes. "Tell me what you need."
The emergency custody hearing was scheduled 3 weeks later. Natalie's lawyer, Jennifer Walsh, had been relentless in pushing it through the system. The night before the hearing, Natalie couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, terrified and hopeful in equal measure. What if it wasn't enough? What if the judge didn't believe her? What if Adrian's lawyers found a way to explain it all away? Ethan held her through the sleepless night, reminded her that she'd done everything possible, that the truth was on her side, that tomorrow would change everything. "I'm scared," Natalie whispered into the darkness. "I know, but you're also the strongest person I know. And no matter what happens tomorrow, I'm with you." The courtroom was sterile and cold. Fluorescent lights, uncomfortable chairs, the smell of old wood. and anxiety. Natalie sat on one side with Jennifer Walsh. Adrian sat on the other with his team of 3 lawyers in expensive suits. Claire sat next to him, her hands clenched on her Chanel purse, her face a mask of controlled confidence. Maya and Zoe were in a room down the hall with a social worker. They wouldn't have to testify. The recordings would speak for them. All rise. The judge entered. She was a woman in her 60s, sharp eyes, no-nonsense expression. Jennifer Walsh stood. Your Honor, we're here today because my client's daughters are being abused. In the home of their father and his fiancée. We have substantial evidence to present. The first thing presented was the photographs. Every bruise Natalie had documented over the past year. Finger-shaped marks. Bruises on upper arms, sides, inner thighs. Places that would be covered by clothing. Adrian's lawyer stood. Your Honor, children get bruises. This proves nothing about intentional harm. Then Jennifer played the recordings. The courtroom went silent as Claire's voice filled the space. Every vicious word, every threat, every moment of cruelty inflicted on 2 4-year-old girls. Stop crying, you little brat. Your mommy doesn't want you. You ruined her life. You and your sister are mistakes. I'm gonna send you away to boarding school where you belong. Natalie watched Adrian's face as he listened, watched the color drain from his skin, watched his hands start to shake. Whatever he'd thought Claire was, he was realizing he'd been wrong. Claire sat rigid, her face pale but defiant. When the recordings finished, the judge looked physically ill. Is there additional testimony? Yes, Your Honor. Jennifer stood. We called Derek Mitchell to the stand. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Claire's head snapped up, her eyes finding Derek as he walked to the stand. For the first time, Natalie saw real fear on Claire's face. Derek was sworn in. He looked at Claire once, something like apology in his eyes, then looked away. Mr. Mitchell, what is your relationship to Claire Thompson? We've been in a relationship for over 2 years. Adrian stood up, his voice cracking. That's a lie. He's lying. Mr. Castellano, sit down or I will hold you in contempt. The judge's voice was sharp. Adrian sat, but his eyes never left Derek. Mr. Mitchell, can you explain the nature of your relationship? Jennifer's voice was gentle. Derek took a breath. Claire and I started seeing each other about 3 years ago. We worked together. Started as an affair, but I fell in love with her. When she got pregnant, I thought we'd be together. He continued, his voice shaking. But she told me she needed financial security first. That she'd pursue a relationship with Adrian Castellano, get pregnant with his child to secure her position. Then, once she had access to his money through marriage or whatever, she'd leave him and we'd be together. The courtroom was dead silent. And the child she had? Jennifer asked. Carter is my biological son. Claire told Adrian the baby was his, but she knew all along it was mine. This is ridiculous. Claire stood up. He's a stalker. I barely know him. Then you won't mind submitting to a DNA test? Jennifer's voice was calm. Claire's mouth opened and closed. No response. Your Honor, we've already submitted a motion for immediate DNA testing of the child known as Carter Castellano. The judge nodded. Motion granted. We'll recess for 1 week pending test results. That week was agony. Natalie went through the motions of life. Work, classes, tried to stay hopeful. The DNA results came back in 5 days. Derek Mitchell, 99.9% match. Carter's biological father. Adrian Castellano, 0% biological relation. When court reconvened, the judge read the results aloud. Adrian's face was blank. Shock so complete he couldn't even react. Claire was crying. Fake tears, Natalie noted. Trying to garner sympathy. Adrian, please. Claire reached for him. I love you. Derek meant nothing. Carter is yours in every way. That matters. Adrian turned to her with eyes so cold Natalie barely recognized him. Get away from me. The judge cleared her throat. I've reviewed all the evidence. The recordings, the photographs, the testimony, and the DNA results. This is one of the most clear-cut cases of child abuse I've seen. She looked directly at Natalie. Full custody is awarded to Natalie Rivera Monroe. Effective. Immediately, Mr. Castellano's visitation rights are reduced to supervised visits, 1 day per week, pending psychological evaluation. She turned to Claire. Ms. Thompson, a restraining order is hereby issued prohibiting any contact with the minor children. Criminal child abuse charges are being filed with the district attorney's office. Natalie couldn't breathe. Full custody. Her daughters were coming home. Jennifer squeezed her hand. We won. Claire was escorted out of the courtroom, still crying, still protesting. Adrian sat motionless, staring at nothing. Natalie stood on shaking legs, walked down the hall to where Maya and Zoe waited with the social worker. The moment they saw her, both girls ran. Mommy! She caught them, held them, buried her face in their hair. You're coming home, babies. You're coming home and you never have to go back. The civil lawsuit came next. Natalie sued both Adrian and Claire for emotional distress, intentional infliction of harm, and fraud. Adrian's company stock plummeted when news of the scandal broke. The headlines were brutal. Billionaire CEO deceived by fiancé in paternity fraud. Child abuse charges filed against Charleston socialite. DNA test reveals heir not his own. Business partners distance themselves. His reputation, built on control and ruthlessness, crumbled. When the world saw him as a man who'd ignored his children's suffering. The civil suit was settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. Enough to secure Maya and Zoe's futures. Enough that Natalie would never have to worry about money again. Claire's perfect life disintegrated overnight. Adrian kicked her out immediately. The prenup she'd insisted on protected him, not her. She had no money, no home, no support system. Derek filed for custody of Carter. The DNA test gave him legal standing. Claire was facing criminal charges and had no way to fight. She was left alone, broke, facing prison time, with no one to turn to. Everything she'd stolen, she'd lost. 8 months after the custody ruling, Natalie stood in family court one final time.
This time it was for joy. Ethan Monroe's petition to legally adopt Maya and Zoe. Adrian had been given the opportunity to object. He'd declined, signed away his parental rights in exchange for the criminal investigation into his neglect being dropped. He'd lost everything that mattered. Some broken part of him finally understood what he'd destroyed. The judge looked at Maya and Zoe, now 5 years old, sitting in the gallery between Natalie and Ethan. Girls, do you understand what adoption means? Maya nodded seriously. It means Ethan becomes our real daddy forever. And is that what you want? Yes. Both girls shouted in unison. The judge smiled, the first genuine smile Natalie had seen from her. Then it's my honor to grant this petition. Mr. Monroe, congratulations. They're officially yours. The courtroom erupted in applause. Natalie was sobbing. Ethan was crying. Maya and Zoe ran to hug him, and he lifted them both, one in each arm. We're a real family, Zoe shouted. We always were. Ethan kissed both their foreheads. Now it's just official. 1 year after the adoption, Natalie Rivera Monroe stood in the kitchen of the home she and Ethan had bought together. A beautiful modern eco-home he designed. All windows and light and open space. A butterfly garden in the backyard. Bedrooms for Maya and Zoe with walls they'd painted themselves. The twins were outside with Ethan, now 6 years old, helping him plant flowers. They were different girls than they'd been 2 years ago. Therapy had helped. Stability had helped. Safety had helped. But mostly being loved unconditionally had helped. Maya was coming out of her shell. She sang in the children's choir at school. Had friends she invited over for playdates. Still shy sometimes, but blossoming. Zoe was bright and joyful. Her love of butterflies now extending to an entire collection of books and drawings and a dream of being a scientist someday. They called Ethan Daddy without hesitation, without fear, with pure love. The doorbell rang. Natalie answered it. and her heart sank. Adrian Castellano stood on her porch. But he looked nothing like the man who had humiliated her in a restaurant 3 years ago. He'd aged a decade. Gray at his temples, lines around his eyes. The confidence that had once defined him was gone, replaced by something hollow. I'm not here to cause trouble. He raised his hands, his voice quiet. I just wanted to see them. Just for a minute. I won't come close. I just need to see that they're okay. Natalie wanted to slam the door in his face. Wanted to call the police. But something in his broken expression stopped her. They don't want to see you. I know. His voice cracked. I know I don't deserve anything from you or from them. I just wanted to tell you that you were right about everything. And I'm sorry. It doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry. Natalie studied him. This broken man who'd once had everything. You had 2 beautiful daughters who loved you, who would have done anything for your approval. And you called them disappointing. Adrian flinched like she'd hit him. I was an idiot. I was cruel. I was exactly the monster you said I was. You were exactly who you chose to be. And now you get to live with that choice. Can I just see them? Just through the window, please. Natalie stepped aside slightly, allowing him a view into the backyard. Maya and Zoe were laughing, dirt on their hands and faces, as Ethan showed them how to plant seedlings. They were radiant, healthy, happy, loved. Adrian watched them with tears streaming down his face. They're beautiful. His voice was barely a whisper. They always were. You just couldn't see it. The man raising them, is he good to them? He's everything you weren't. Patient, kind, present. He sees them, values them, loves them for exactly who they are. Adrian nodded, his face crumpling with regret. Good. That's good. They deserve that. He turned to leave, then stopped. For what it's worth, losing all of you was the worst thing that ever happened to me. I know I did it to myself. I know there's no going back. But I'd give anything, everything I have left, to undo what I did. You can't go back. Natalie's voice was quiet but firm. None of us can. But you can choose to be better going forward. Not for us. We don't need you. We don't want anything from you. But for yourself. Adrian nodded and walked away. Natalie watched him go and felt nothing. No anger. No satisfaction. No pain. Just peace. That evening, after Maya and Zoe were tucked into bed with stories and kisses and promises that they were safe and loved, Natalie and Ethan sat on their back porch watching the sunset. Adrian came by today. Natalie said it casually. Ethan tensed. Is everything okay? Everything's perfect. He wanted to see the girls. I let him look through the window. Then I sent him away. How did that feel? Natalie thought about it. Like closing a book I'd already finished reading. He's not part of our story anymore. Ethan pulled her close, kissed her temple. I'm proud of you for everything you survived. Everything you built. We built. Natalie corrected, leaning into him. I couldn't have done any of this without you. You could have. You're the strongest person I know. But I'm honored I got to be part of your journey. From inside the house, they heard giggles. Maya and Zoe were supposed to be sleeping but were clearly reading with flashlights under the blankets. Ethan stood. I'll go handle the rebels. Natalie watched him go inside, her heart full. She'd lost everything once. Been betrayed by the people she loved most. Been broken down to nothing. But she'd rebuilt. Not into who she'd been before, but into someone stronger. Someone who knew her worth. Someone who understood that the family you choose is often more powerful than the one you're born into. Inside, Ethan sat on the edge of the girls' bed. All right, troublemakers. Sleep time. For real this time. Maya looked up at him with her mother's warm brown eyes. Daddy? Yes, sweetheart? Are you gonna stay forever? Ethan's heart clenched. Forever and ever. Promise. Even when we're grown up. Even when you're grown up, married with kids of your own, and I'm an old man who can't remember where I put my glasses. I'll still be your daddy. Always. Zoe threw her arms around his neck. You're the best daddy in the whole world. You two are the best daughters in the whole world." He kissed both their foreheads, turned off the light. He stood in the doorway for a moment, watching them settle into sleep. These weren't his daughters by blood, but they were his in every way that mattered. And he would spend the rest of his life making sure they knew they were loved, valued, and safe. Out on the porch, Natalie looked up at the stars and smiled. The girl who'd been humiliated in front of 100 people had found her voice. The woman who'd been told she was worthless had built a career she was proud of. The mother who'd fought an impossible battle had won. And the heart that had been shattered had learned to love again. Bigger, deeper, truer than before. This is what Claire and Adrian didn't understand. They thought they were taking everything from her. Thought they were winning. But they'd actually set her free. Free to find real love. Free to build a real family. Free to become who she was always meant to be. And that was the greatest victory of all.
Family, if this story touched your heart, if Natalie's strength inspired you, if you believe in justice and second chances and the power of real love, I need you to do something for me right now. Hit that like button. Smash it. This story needs to reach people who are in their darkest moment, who think they'll never survive, who need to know that broken things can be made beautiful again. Share this video. Send it to someone who's been betrayed, someone who's fighting an impossible fight, someone who needs hope. And comment below. Tell me what this story meant to you. Tell me if you've ever had to rebuild from nothing. Tell me where you're watching from, or just say I'm with you, Mr. Hearthline. Subscribe to Mr. Hearthline Stories if you haven't already, because this family doesn't just tell stories. We tell truth. We speak life. We remind each other that we're stronger than we know. Remember this, beautiful family. You are stronger than your worst day. You are more than what was done to you. You are more than the people who betrayed you. And you are worthy of a love that sees you, values you, and chooses you every single day. The people who tried to destroy you, they don't get to write your ending. You do. So write it well. Write it with courage. Write it with hope. Write it knowing that every ending is also a beginning. Until the next story, may you walk in grace, fight with courage, and love without fear. This is Mr. Hearthline, and you are loved. You are seen. You are valued. And your story is not over yet.